When it comes to the fighting game genre, Capcom has always been leader of the pack. Street Fighter II was the original competitive fighting game that sucked players off of their home consoles and back into arcades, creating a truly unique experience that can't be replicated at home. The popularity of Capcom's fighting games offered the opportunity to take the genre to strange new places. Aside from fighting games, Capcom was also known for their licensed games featuring characters from both the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Comics, among others. This led Capcom to create fighting games based on Marvel's superheroes, including a game exclusively based on the X-Men. With this in mind, Capcom decided to mix their homemade chocolate with the licensed peanut butter, resulting in the Capcom vs. series. X-Men vs. Street Fighter would be the first title, followed by Marvel vs. Capcom and Capcom vs. SNK. These games were designed to be more accessible to casual players, while still being deeply enjoyable experience for veterans. Not every Versus game would be a smash hit within the genre, though. Today we're going to take a look at two offbeat titles in the Versus series. Neither were obscure on release, but neither would be remembered in the same way fans remember Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or Capcom vs. SNK 2. Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite aren't bad games in the slightest, quite the opposite in fact, but for a variety of reasons we're going to explore, they both unarguably deserve the title of offbeat Capcom vs. games. You can push yourself to the limit, be strong and jump with me. You can fly above the rain. Let's not bury the lead here. Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is one of the wildest ideas for a mainstream video game, and it's a miracle the game even exists. Released exclusively in Japan for the Wii and in arcades, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom was the result of a request from famed animation studio Tatsunoko Production for Capcom to make a game based on their properties. The game was made alongside Street Fighter IV, which was designed for core players in order to help bring the fighting game genre back after several years of absence. For those who weren't kids in Japan in the 1960s, Tatsunoko Production is an animation studio that would be considered Japan's answer to Hanna-Barbera. Famous for series like Speed Racer, Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, and Samurai Pizza Cats, Tatsunoko is a company known for its varying genres. To the Japanese audience the game was intended for, the mashup makes sense. Yeah, a few of the characters included are goofy and silly, but that's an aspect that the Versus series has always been known for. Tatsunoko have earned their bona fides in the action genre, and the likes of Ken the Eagle, Tekkaman, and Karas prove that this game is no joke. So if this game is so Japan-centric, why did they release it overseas? Well, there was originally no plan to release it outside of Japan. Licensing issues, as well as the general obscurity of the Tatsunoko characters, made the title a localization nightmare. It was because of the fan community's demands for the game that Capcom put forth to release an international version of the game featuring 5 new characters called Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars. All the Capcom characters, obviously, belonged to Capcom and thus weren't an issue. The Tatsunoko characters, on the other hand, proved a challenge. In Japan, Tatsunoko Production outright owned all of the characters that appeared in the game, but in North America and Europe, the properties had been licensed out to several different companies for localization. For example, in America, Science Ninja Team Gatchaman was adapted 3 times, by Sandy Frank Entertainment as Battle of the Planets in 1978, by Sandy Frank and Turner Entertainment as G-Force Guardians of Space in 1986, and by Saban Entertainment as Eagle Riders in 1996. Another issue was public awareness of Tatsunoko characters, as virtually none of the characters included were well known around the time of the game's release. Capcom had asked the fans which characters they would like to see added to the game for the international release, but for unknown reasons were unable to add the two most requested franchises, Speed Racer and Samurai Pizza Cats. Adding to the frustration, the character of Hakushon Daimao, one of the game's few grapplers, was removed due to licensing issues that couldn't be resolved. The character wasn't particularly well received in the original release, but his exclusion is still a notable example of the logistical nightmare localization can be. The Capcom side of the roster was an interesting mix of characters not previously seen in any Versus titles. Series staples such as Ryu and Chun-Li from Street Fighter, Roll from Mega Man, as well as Morgan from Darkstalkers return. Newcomers include Alex from Street Fighter III, Mega Man Walnut from Mega Man Legends, and Batsu from Rival Schools. Frank West, Beautiful Joe, and Zero would all return with similar movesets in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in 2011. Differences between the original release and the updated international version are minimal outside of the added characters and some quality of life changes, but some things were curiously replaced or removed altogether. The original game included fully animated endings for each character, with animation provided by Tatsunoko Production naturally, as well as character-specific minigames. The international version replaces all of the endings with slideshows featuring artwork from Udon, who would go on to do similar story sequences for Street Fighter 4 and 5. The original also featured individual character theme songs similar to Marvel vs. Capcom, while the international version replaces these character themes for generic themes specific for each stage. Due to time and budget constraints, the minigames included with the original game were replaced with one single minigame, Ultimate All Shooters, based on PTX 40A's minigame. The end credits feature a semi-minigame where you collect letters spelling out "Thank you for playing" as Doranjo and her lackeys, or if you beat the arcade mode as Roll, you fly through the credits as Roll on her broom to an updated version of her theme song from Rockman Battle and Chase. Fun fact, Street Fighter producer Yoshinori Ono originally composed Roll's theme. Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is a fun, casual-leaning fighting game that worked well as a companion piece to Street Fighter 4 upon its release. It was also a great way to introduce Western audiences to famous Japanese characters they either didn't know or had forgotten about. Due to the licensing issues surrounding the Tatsunoko brand, a remaster or sequel is incredibly unlikely. But in a way, that's okay. It's not the most necessary game in the Versus series, and with time, it'll be known as one of the lost treasures of the Wii. Okay, I know what you're gonna say. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite just came out. How is it offbeat? Well, let's explore that. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was a surprise announcement in December 2016 and was released less than a year later in September 2017. The first Capcom-produced Marvel game since 2011's Marvel vs. Capcom 3, the game wasn't particularly well received by fans and critics alike. After the release of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Disney decided to pull the Marvel license from Capcom and focus on producing their own games in-house. After this plan didn't work out so well for the House of Mouse, they decided to go back to licensing their properties. Capcom was approached about doing another Marvel vs. Capcom game, and they accepted the deal. The Marvel side of the game was largely inspired by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which had gained considerable traction since the release of Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The game's visuals steered more toward photorealism rather than the previous game's more comic book inspired art style. This artistic decision wound up hurting the game, as certain characters, specifically on the Capcom side, wound up looking incredibly ugly. The Marvel side looked like their movie counterparts, save for Captain America, who looks like a Rob Liefeld nightmare. One major addition to the game, a first for the Versus series, was the game's cinematic story mode. Similar to the story modes found in Mortal Kombat or Injustice, the player is led through an immersive story that finds the Marvel and Capcom characters at the center of a plot to converge both universes. Ultron, the robotic villain from the Marvel Universe, becomes best pals with Sigma, the Reploid, or robotic, villain from the Capcom universe, and with the power of 2 of the Infinity Stones become Ultron Sigma. The plot is completely original, with inspiration taken from the numerous Infinity Stone stories from the Marvel Universe. The Avengers team up with a hodgepodge of Capcom leftovers from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Spencer from 2009's Bionic Commando, really? In order to stop Ultron Sigma and fix their respective universes. The premise is hokey, but the execution is surprisingly well done. Seeing Iron Man crack jokes with Dante from Devil May Cry made me ugly laugh. The story mode is 100% reliant on the character interactions and making this new converged universe believable. Another highlight is Rocket Raccoon trying to ask X about his Buster, possibly a nod to a running joke in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, where Rocket is constantly trying to take people's artificial limbs. The game isn't all fun and smiles though. It's time to address the elephant in the room. There's a big gaping hole in the character roster that's immediately noticeable to longtime fans of the series. Since Capcom first started making Versus titles, the X-Men have been a focal point of the series. X-Men vs. Street Fighter was the first game in the series, followed by Marvel vs. Capcom, so fans were disappointed to find out that no mutants would be appearing in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. You see, Fox owns the movie rights to the X-Men characters, and Marvel has had a long-running feud with them because of this. Since Disney purchased Marvel, they've been less inclined to feature the X-Men in any major licensed media, as it would essentially be free advertising for the competition. Wolverine, Storm, Sentinel, Magneto, and Deadpool were popular characters in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so their exclusion from the roster was painful for fans. From a business perspective, it makes sense for Marvel to avoid advertising Fox's X-Men movies, but it was a significant loss for longtime fans who've been with the series since the 90s. Frankly speaking, the Capcom characters felt irrelevant altogether. Most of the characters were carryovers from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Ryu, Chun-Li, Morgan, Dante, Spencer, Mike Hagar, Arthur, Chris Redfield, Zero, Firebrand, Frank West, Nemesis, and Strider Hiryu all returned from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, with only X, Sigma, Jeddah, and Monster Hunter being new characters. Infinite feels like it would have been better off as a remake of Marvel superheroes, nixing the Capcom side of the roster altogether. The game already functions as a giant commercial for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically 2018's Avengers Infinity War, so it would have made sense for Capcom to skip the Versus aspect altogether. Maybe offer some Capcom characters as DLC, but the main game should have focused entirely on the Marvel side. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is a severely underrated game that unfortunately didn't offer much for core fighting game fans. Coincidentally, at E3 2017, a new game in the long-running Dragon Ball series was announced that drew inspiration from the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Dragon Ball FighterZ' announcement was the final nail in the coffin for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, especially when it was announced that FighterZ would be featured at EVO 2018 instead of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. For fans of both Marvel and Capcom, Infinite is definitely worth checking out. The story mode can be cleared in 4 hours and is worth playing through on a rainy day. For die-hard fighting game fans, you might as well just buy Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 since it was re-released for PS4, Xbox One, and PC when Infinite was announced. While Capcom's fighting games have always been deadly serious when it comes to gameplay, they've also had a tinge of humor and fun to them. The Versus series takes that fun and silliness and dials it up to 11. Though licensing issues may make it difficult for gamers to play a lot of the Versus games, especially ones like Tatsunoko vs. Capcom that are trapped on a single console, they're always worth scoping out. Marvel might be a household name, but with how often Capcom loses the rights to make Marvel games, it seems it might be a mystery when or if the next one ever happens. It's possible that Disney might not let them make another after Infinite's performance, but who knows? Nobody expected Capcom to ever re-release Marvel vs. Capcom 2 after they lost the rights in the early 2000s, but the game got a re-release in 2009, followed by the announcement of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in 2010. At this point, anything's possible.
伝えたい